Good evening, design community. Welcome to Design Chat with Ida Laura. Today is July 8th of the year of 2020. Tonight's topic, interior design contracts. A contract is a bargain between two or more parties, each of whom agrees to exchange something one or more of others desire to obtain. For example, the client wants an interior space design and the designer desires to be paid for his or her services. In a legal sense, there are two parts to this: an offer by one party and an acceptance by the other. Every contract, whether written or oral, must have both an offer and an acceptance to be valid. If one person offers to do something and does it without acceptance by the other party, an agreement to receive something in return, a contract does not exist. There are elements to a valid contract, such as fair consideration, meaning money to be paid, but offer and acceptance are the most fundamental elements. A contract between an interior designer and a client can take many forms. It might be a brief letter of agreement, a document developed by the designers or client's attorney specifically for a particular project, a standardized pre-printed form developed by a professional design organization such as AIA or ASID, or a standardized form that the client might use on all his or her design projects. Basic elements of a contract. A contract should include the following provisions. Number 1, parties to the contract end date. This is very important. The full legal name of both parties must be clearly stated along with their addresses and the date of the contract. The person signing the contract must have legal authority to do so. For residential work, for a married couple, for example, both should sign the contract, so they are each separate responsible. Number 2, a scope of work and designer's responsibility. This is one of the most important parts of any agreement in interior design. Is the part that describes the exact amount of work the designer promises to do. This should include the actual area of work. For example, such as only the reception room and main conference of an office suite, that's an example, as well as detailed description of services. The scope of work may be divided into common phases such as schematic design, design development, and construction, and each phase might be subdivided in more detail. This is useful if billing for services is being done after completion of each phase. Fewer disputes will arise if services are specifically itemized. The more specific, the more detailed you are in a contract, the better. It is also acceptable to itemize those services that will not be provided, such as purchasing furniture or construction observation. This technique is useful for pointing out services that are normally included in a designer's contract and that the client might expect or just to think that if the services are not specifically excluded, then they are included. Number 3, purchasing agreements, if any. If the interior designer will be buying furniture and fixtures and reselling them to the client, any agreement should clearly state the designer's responsibility as well as the client's responsibilities for final payment, acceptance of work, rejection of damaged goods, payment of delivery and installation costs, payment of deposits, and methods of purchasing furniture and equipment. Any agreement or contract should be consistent with the Uniform Commercial Code, or the UCC, and with any specific laws of the state in which the designer is practicing. In my case, is the state of Florida. The AIA standard forms state that if the interior designer will be purchasing furniture and equipment on behalf of the owner, the duties and the compensation for such additional services must be set forth in a separate document. So you must put that amount, that percentage that you're gonna earn from the furniture, from purchasing the furniture, in a separate document. Number 4, method of payment. Any contract should state how much the client will be charged for services and how services will be paid for. There are several ways of charging for professional services, including a fixed fee, multiple of direct personal expense, percentage of project costs, and cost per unit area, along with several variations of these basic methods. The agreement should also clearly define when payment is to be made. For example, monthly, every 15 days, every 45 days, every 60 days, at the completion of each phase, or on some other schedule. It should also include payment due dates and any provision for late payments. Number 5, reimbursable expenses. Reimbursable expenses are costs that are not part of professional services but are necessary to complete the project. These include things such as travel, long-distance telephone calls, reproduction costs, and postage. On large jobs, these expenses can be significant, and it is important to itemize them so the client does not think they are part of the professional fee, and we know that that never happened. Fees for consultants, such as electrical and mechanical engineers, may be included here or with methods of compensations. Many designers bill their clients the cost of the consultant fees plus a 10% covering the cost of coordination, billing, paperwork, and all of that. That is a standard way of doing business. Number 6, to be included in an interior design contract is extra services. Yes, you should have a clause on extra services. It is common for a client to request extra work from the designer once a project begins. It happens every time. This may include things like studying more design options, expanding the area of the job, specifying additional furniture, or requiring a longer time commitment due to some delays or other things out of your control. Many disputes can be avoided by clearly listing the type of extra services or additional services, the charges for them, and how they will be billed to the client. The designer then is protected by providing this extra work for free. We don't want to do that. Number 7, to be included in an interior design contract. Responsibilities of the client. Most projects require that the client perform certain actions or provide necessary information for the job to be completed. For instance, maybe it's a remodelation project, it's an existing building, so you need the client to provide you with existing plans or existing measurements or any documentation. So those are client's responsibility. These might include things like buying and arranging for moving a client, supply equipment, arranging for space to receive furniture delivered to the site job, or providing, like I said, as-built drawings to the designer. Number 8, ownership of documents, and this is really important for you as a designer. This provision states that the designer retains the right of ownership of the documents and that the documents are only to be used to complete the specific project for which they are or they were developed. The client may not reuse them to build other projects without permission and, of course, an adequate compensation to the designer. This type of contractual provision is most often used with a copyright notice on the drawings themselves. So in the construction document sheets, you make sure that you put like a note that says like, in my case, Ida Laura owns these construction documents, or there's copyright on these construction documents. Make sure that you add a note on those plans in addition to the note that you're gonna add in the contract. Number 9, provisions for arbitration. Because disputes often arrive, right? It happens. A contract should include procedures for arbitration. This alternative is generally faster and less costly than taking a disagreement to court. Of course, you're gonna pay a lot of money, the client is gonna pay money too, so this is the best way to go. But both parties must agree to arbitration in the original contract. So from the beginning, you should have that on your contract. Number 10, termination of the contract. A termination clause gives both the designer and the client the right to quit the contract upon giving adequate written notice, usually at least 7 days. If the contract is terminated by the client through not fault of the designer, because things happen, the designer must be compensated for work performed up to the time of the termination. So you should send that invoice to the client and terminate your contract. Number 11, and this is the last one, signatures. To be legally valid, the contract needs to be signed only by the client, the person accepting the offer of the contract. However, it is better if both the designer and the client sign the agreement and date it. ASID had developed standardized contract forms for residential and commercial projects that you could use. As a designer, you have that platform that you can buy those templates from ASID or AIA and use those as a standard contract with your clients. These are 3 types of contracts. The first one is a fixed fee contract, the template from ASID. And this type of contract is when you have a project that you are putting a fixed cost, so you are providing already with the total cost. The other template that ASID provides, and you can go to asid.org and just buy the template and use it for your clients every time you have a project. Hourly rate. So if you have a project that you want to charge per hour, it has the language to charge the client per hour. And then the third type of contract is mixed contract. So you have some services that are charged per hour, and you have other services that will be already charged by the set cost or the fixed fee that you agree with the client. Determining the type of contract that work best for the project will all depend on the size of the project, right? The type of the project, and how familiar you are with the scope of the project. So remember, design for me is people, design for me is community, design for me is you, and I am here because of you. Thank you for joining me. Don't forget to subscribe to my YouTube channel, like my videos, and support my community. Thank you so much. Have a wonderful night.